Hello, my name is Erica Murunji and welcome to Be Inspired by Erica. So today I want to talk about...
Keep others on your wallet! Again! What's the drama? Drama? Colleagues, elections for special interest groups are calling. SIGs, elections, youth, PWDs, elderly. It's time to vote for our leaders, June through August. From village to parish to district to nationals, youth, PWDs, elderly. It's time, go vote your leaders. No! Elections will be peaceful. Easy vote, okay?
Youth, elderly, and persons with disabilities. It's time to choose our leaders. Let's show up and participate in the special interest group elections. Starting June through August this year. Your vote, your voice, my vote, my voice. This message is brought to you by the Uganda Electoral Commission.
Yes, on 24.
Entrepreneurs have given you a deep and unique insight into agribusiness, services, ICT, and innovation, industrialization, and so much more. Entrepreneurs Hub, growing your small, medium, and large business entity. With yours truly, Sandra Kabode.
Keep others on your wallet! Bobby! Again! What's the drama? Drama? Colleagues, elections for special interest groups are calling. SIGs, elections. Youth, PWDs, elderly. It's time to vote for our leaders, June through August. From village to parish to district to nationals, youth, PWDs, elderly. It's time. Go vote your leaders. No! Elections are supposed to be peaceful. Easy vote, okay?
Youth, elderly, and persons with disabilities. It's time to choose our leaders. Let's show up and participate in the special interest group elections. Starting June through August this year. Your vote, your voice, my vote, my voice. This message is brought to you by the Uganda Electoral Commission.
Hi, my name is Doreen Tuhiriwe, coming to you from Be Money Wiser, and we're going to be bringing to you the hashtag 100 Ways to Be Money Wiser by Mrs. T. Tilda Nabandra. We're going to be running this hashtag 100 Ways to Be Money Wiser on U24 television. Don't miss out.
U24.
Keep others on your wallet! are calling. SIG's elections. PWD's elderly. It's time to vote for our leaders. June through August. From village to parish to district to nationals. Youth, PWD's elderly. It's time, go vote your leader. No! Elections are supposed to be peaceful. Easy vote, okay?
Youth, elderly, and persons with disabilities. It's time to choose our leaders. Let's show up and participate in the special interest group elections. Starting June through August this year. Your vote, your voice. My vote, my voice. This message is brought to you by the Uganda Electoral Commission.
Good evening, welcome. This is the Checkpoint. My name is Ivan Tumkunde. You're watching U24 Television, your national youth development and education channel. On the Checkpoint, we talk everything to do with the law and helping you to understand it in the most simplistic terms. Welcome and a good evening. With me in studio today, as usual, I have the suspects from LDC. I don't know by law who is a suspect and stuff, but the good thing is I have lawyers in the house. So welcome to the show, and I'll start from my far left. Kindly introduce yourself.
Thank you so much. I'm Henry Raymond Kalunji. I'm a lawyer and currently a student of the Law Development Center. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. Gentlemen.
Yes, thank you. My name is Dalton Chisule, and I'm equally a student at the Law Development Center.
Thank you, Dalton.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Lawrence Alado. I am also a student at Law Development Center, and I am a lawyer.
Thank you so much. And tonight we are discussing the issue of taxation and also tax collection and the revenue that we get as a country. We want to be able to add up the maths. Actually, does it make sense? But most importantly, to look at the legalities. Why are there issues to do with the tax base, definitely, which affects and brings about the tax burden that we have as a country? Do we always hit the targets that are set for the local revenue that we're supposed to have? If not, what is the problem and what can be done in the perspective of the law to help more Ugandans get into paying the taxes and helping to make sure that as a country we can be able to have enough revenues to foster development for our lovely country, Uganda? It's a responsibility for all of us actually to contribute in making Uganda a better country. And by paying your tax, you're putting a brick in making sure that that happens. And tonight, that's our discussion as we reflect on the budget that was just read to us and to understand the next financial year 2025-2026, but also reflecting on the financial year ending 2024-2025. And to start with you, kindly introduce us to taxation in Uganda.
Thank you. So, Uganda's tax strategy is quite broad, and that includes both domestic and international tax. So Uganda is a member of the East African Community, and also Uganda is a member of the United Nations. So that influences our tax strategy as well. So from a domestic point of view, there are several points of taxation or areas which you could say you are users to raise revenue. That includes income tax. Income tax is essentially tax which is paid for income that one derives, and that income can either be business income, an individual's income, it can be capital gains, it can also be rent that someone is obtaining, but also it can be employment income. So next to income tax is what we know as excise duty. So excise duty is the tax which is paid on particular aspects which you are as or which the Ugandan tax law has classified that you should pay excise on. And the amendment is always every year. Some items are included, some are added. And so I think we shall talk about that later on what items are now taxed and which ones are not taxed anymore.
Yep.
But also we have stamp duty. If previously you had an agreement, or if you execute a mortgage, or if you carry out a land transaction, then you're supposed to pay stamp duty for the documents that you're transacting on. And then from that, we also look at customs. So customs essentially is where you're exporting or you're importing goods. So it's the tax that you pay as you export or you import goods. So that then leads us to the international aspects of it, which is either from the East African level, the East African management laws, or from the UN level, where the UN influences what kind of policies that a state can have, especially given the fact that Uganda is a developing state. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Dalton, who is eligible to paying taxes? When we were growing up, when we were very tender, we used to hear, you turn 18, then, tax is coming for you. I think that's when we still had head tax. But also you do something and people are like, solo. You're not paying taxes. But then we don't get to realize how many ways are there that we're paying taxes, either indirectly or directly. So if you could kindly help us to break that down, who pays taxes and actually what kind of taxes do they pay?
Yes, thank you very much. Actually, to interest you, first of all, the history of taxation in this country has mostly been coercive. So what you're referring to, what you refer to as the head tax, was usually called, or it was termed legally as the graduate tax, which was payable by every adult person in the country. And the interesting bit about the study of that particular tax is that it was a source of prestige. A man actually would enter into whatever place it is and presents his tickets. And he's like, how many of you here have more tickets than me? I have 18 tickets. So it is interesting.
So people then used to feel pride in actually paying the tax?
Yes, they used to think so. But then the tax was scrapped off, of course, after several complaints and various considerations by the government and the ministry. When we are talking about taxation, I think the point at which we begin to actually build on or understand that concept is from the constitutional structure itself. Under our laws, or the supreme law that governs our country, it is a duty of every citizen to pay tax. It is a duty of every citizen to pay tax. And interestingly, the traditional definition of a tax legally is that it's a charge which is charged over whatever base it is. A base is anything that is taxable. Let's say income. So it's a compulsory levy on your income for which you shouldn't expect any quid pro quo or anything in return. So fundamentally, taxes are built in a way that the state within which you're located has the authority to actually tax you, and you're not supposed to expect anything. So that is where the duty comes from, Article 17 of the Constitution, imposing you, an adult citizen, of course, with a duty to pay taxes. Now, when we get to the particular granular concepts of what taxation entails and who is taxable, that is when now we consider under what particular head of tax that we consider, as my brother highlighted, those particular taxes: income tax, value-added tax, and excise. Now, each of those taxes plays a different role, but to use the example of income has a particular threshold below which a particular person cannot be taxed. Now, that particular threshold is what usually people reduce into monthly thresholds to be able to compute your pay as you earn. Pay as you earn is not tax, it's a measure of collecting. That when you're earning your salary at that particular amount. So provided you have an income, and provided that particular income surpasses the threshold below which you must not be taxed, then you'll be charged with income. as my brother highlighted, income tax, of course, comes in several distinctions as well. We have income from employment, which is employment income. We have business income. We have property income and rental income. Yeah, we also have capital gains, which is a gain that you actually derive from disposing of your property. So under those particular aspects, it depends on what particular base. Tax base is that particular aspect that is being taxed, the topic of the taxation. So for you, an individual, the tax base is income. If it's income tax, then under the value added tax regime, the tax base is actually the taxable supply that you're making, and provided it also passes the particular threshold that is desired. Other particular taxes such as excise. Excise traditionally is a tax that is used to eliminate externalities. Now, those externalities are undesired particular aspects in community that would want, or the government would want to be contained from the society. If you recall the speech of the minister introducing the budget, he actually alluded to the Honorable Minister that, Madam Minister, we have actually increased excise tax on cigarettes so that we can contain or reduce the consumption of cigarettes. So now excise plays that particular tax. You want people to quit cigarettes, you add more excise. But then it is interesting that the government is using such a particular tax to actually raise revenue. And I think it is known because those are particular goods or commodities which have a bit, is it called an inelastic demand. Whether you increase the price or not, a person who smokes will always find out smoking. So briefly,
maybe the amount of smoking can be able to be reduced because of how much they have to spend in order to smoke. But same, I think, when it comes to, for example, the import tax and know that it can help, for example, to help build our economy and empower local manufacturers when definitely taxes are put on some of those things that we can be able to produce locally. So certainly, and that brings me to the question to you on the issue of how the legal perspective, legalities do hinder Ugandans from actually getting to help in increasing our tax base. You will find very many people finding ways. Definitely everyone would want to find a way to yes, to evade not only tax but to avoid money moving out of their pockets, and definitely one of the things that take money out of your pocket is the tax. But you'll find that most of the times the tax takes out of your pocket is actually not your money, and it's something that I think through sensitization, URA should be able to put much more effort on helping people to understand.
Thank you so much. So the main issue or the legal perspective that hinders people from paying taxes sometimes can be governed on ignorance, and another aspect can be governed on the so much informality that Ugandan businesses operate. Exactly. For example, if I told you to go to Chiembe, individuals manufacture from there, and by law, if I told you get material from Nigeria or import it, and change that material to become a suit, you're supposed to pay an 18%, and that 18% is supposed to go to the government. If you choose that example, we find out that one, even government on its end has become a bit lazy to collect that tax. And when you look at the solution, because taxation is a policy, and it's a policy. When you look at solutions like F-freeze and the like, when you try to impose them to the people, or to the people that generate those revenues, you find out that there is a lot of backlash, and government always loses out. The main issue is that people are non-sensitized on what their taxes should do. First and foremost, if you're to take back the argument of, because taxation is a form of revenue collection for the government, if you're to take back the argument to which other forms might be there that are alternative to taxation, if you explain to the normal Ugandan that if at all we decide that we shall get all our revenue from, let me say, debt financing, we get debts from the IMF, we get debts from China and the like, you find out that the impact will be far-reaching, as they will have to pay more money for that. And when you explain to these people that if at all you pay the pay as you earn, if at all you pay the VAT, if at you do all these taxes, the impact will be slower, will have more healthcare and the like. So I think that is also a problem. The biggest problem first is ignorance. The second problem is the fact that most of these taxes have become online. For example, if I told you to file a document on URSB, you pay the money online, they'll send you PRN on your phone.
But how many people can be able to actually do it?
That is the other problem.
Yeah, and even before you get there, I would want us to pick it from actually the beginning, because before you even... Yes, the person who is in Chiembe to be able to pick it up that I need to formalize my business. All I've been known to is that I'm Ivan Tumukunde, I move and go to China. I was introduced to that by a friend. Now I go buy my things. If I'm to pay my tax, that's what they charge me when I'm bringing in my things, and that's it. I don't find a proper reason to say maybe I need to formalize my business, either as a business name or as an incorporated company of sort.
Yes.
And the issue usually is about the process. Someone looks at it, I have to get someone, either a lawyer who's going to do it on my behalf, or I have to do it through a broker that is going to help me work on the documentation, because they fear going directly, for example, to URSB to do the registration themselves. They can't be able to put that paperwork.
If I can enter in at that particular point, I think the biggest problem there is the brokers or the lawyers that claim to help these people register these businesses.
But how are they the problem? Because the issue is, if it was easy, then I wouldn't need a broker. Why I'm using a broker is because I can't do it myself.
At that particular point, before, business registration used to be physical. You write down your name, you write down like 4 names, you get on a bus, you go to URA. Currently, if I told you to open URSB, you find out that for you to register your business name, you need to fill 3 names, and you will choose one and you pay the fee. Now, what the broker will tell this individual, they'll tell them that for you to register your business name, you have to pay 200,000. Yet in actual sense, it's like 20,000. The act the act says 20,000, but it's 35,000. So that becomes a problem. An individual will think it's more expensive than it actually is. However, if at all URA was to set up, let me say, URA booths in all those business hotspots, where there are free URA people that help these people register these businesses, that will become actually simpler. Because
they actually, but I'm looking at the bureaucracy, because I wanted to show you how actually how many levels you have to go through, for example, to we even speak about the challenges of paying tax. So one, you have to be able to incorporate your company, or just register it as a business name, in order for you to acquire a TIN number, tax identification number. Otherwise, you can't pay tax even if you're registered with your RSP and you don't have a tax identification number. And for someone to incorporate their company, they need the articles of association, they need the objectives and all that, actually, which a common person might find difficult to put together. So even if they move to a center, you'll find they can't be able to put that information together.
Actually, you see, I disagree with the argument that making the registration online is actually burdensome. If you're to physically go to the URSB portal, you find out that the article is already generated. You just put in your name, you just put in what your business will be doing, and the articles are automatically generated. But because of these brokers, the lawyers and all the other people, they do not tell the general public that this has been done. So if at all I need to get 5 million from someone for purposes of business registration, I will not tell them that you just put your name.
Why would you?
I wouldn't, because that's my business. I'll try to make it difficult into their eyes. I tell them you need articles, you need a memorandum, but all that is automatically generated. So it goes back to my point of education. If URA or URSB or all those revenue agencies went ahead to educate this person that this and this and this actually can happen, it will be good. Another problem we have is that individuals do not think that taxation, actually, if you register your business, they'll overtax you. But surprisingly, the tax regime in our country is that we tax you according to the amount you declare. So an individual, actually, this should not be to be said on air, but an individual can declare that they made losses and what any tax.
As long as you can prove that you made losses. And
yeah, which is also easy. But
to the extent that even when you make profits, leave out declaring that you've made losses. You're given a certain percentage. If you're making less than less than 10 million,
yes,
you're not taxed.
That is legally called a threshold.
Exactly.
There is a threshold beyond which, for example, I think it's important for the viewer to understand. For example, pay as you earn. There is a threshold beyond which someone cannot pay as you earn. You can't be earning 100,000 and you pay as you earn. So that threshold is also there in business. However, actually there is a lot of money in town. You can find that an individual can turn over, for example, these people that sell phones. An individual can tell that they can turn over 2 million in a day.
Yeah.
And it's all profit.
Most especially for these informal businesses.
Yes.
Someone is going to tell you that I make my 5 million a day.
Then the other problem people have, or why they fear to register their businesses, is because they think that URA is supreme, because some individual registered their business and they gave them a tax, they gave them a tax assessment of like 200 million.
Yes, yes.
And this individual be like, the other person got this tax assessment, so we lie. However, there are mechanisms that have been established. There is a tax appeals tribunal. If at all an individual has been taken to the tax appeals tribunal with proof, it'd be like I got a tax assessment of 200 million. However, I only sold goods worth 1 million. So if at all an individual has a well-documented work plan, they have their cash flow statement, they have all this, they have excellent bookkeeping, they can actually win, and the tax appeals tribunal will overturn that. And if at all an individual is still dissatisfied with the tax appeals tribunal, they can still go to the Court of Appeal. And if at all you're to research on all the cases, you find out that 60% of the decisions of the appeal overturn the decisions of the tax appeals tribunal. So an individual has autonomy, and actually the tax collector does not have a lot of autonomy over the individual. An individual will have autonomy to go and say, no, I've been unfairly taxed, no, and if the tribunal refuses, they go to court, and court will provide these reliefs. So actually, I think the general public should be informed that taxes are important for their development and that of the country.
And definitely the legalities should be able to ease the process for them to pay the tax, not to become the bureaucracy that makes it very, very difficult. Coming to you, if you can, maybe you wanted to supplement your pick from him, but if you can also pick on the issue of double taxation. You hear very many people saying, you know, I'm paying over 10 taxes on one thing. So if you could also break it down for someone to understand that if you're doing this kind of business, this is the tax that you pay. If you're to pay withholding, it has to be business a transaction between A and B. If you're to pay value-added tax, it has to be on ABC, and ABC is actually the person who pays that tax.
I think that, in my opinion, the challenge with the tax system all boils down to policy. And policy being how easy is it for someone to understand the tax they're supposed to pay, and how easy is it for them to pay that particular tax. So I think that at the end of the day, URA has to do two things, right? One is not only show people why they need to pay their taxes, but also to make it easy for them to pay those taxes. And then 3 is make them understand that this particular tax you paid is for 1, 2, 3, and 4, which leads me to the question of double taxation. Because let's say, for example, in the 2025 amendment now of the tax laws under the Income Tax Act, if you, and the Tax Procedure Code Act, if you do not pay your electronic filings, if you do not use IFRIS, the penalty is now double. So if someone doesn't know something like that, they will say that once they are taxed double and they are being forced to pay double what they should have paid had they used IFRIS, someone will say, I've been forced to pay more tax than I should have paid. But the problem is, actually, you didn't know that this is the penalty for paying, for failing to file
returns.
So because you failed to file, now you have to pay twice the amount you should have paid. And it's quite interesting because with the 2025 amendments, there are actually a lot of exemptions that have been given to the taxing community in Uganda. And the taxpayers have exemptions that they can use. However, you need to know that this is exemption, this is what I should pay, and this is what I should not pay. And you should be able to then, from that knowledge, make your assessment and pay where you're supposed to pay. So double taxation is twofold. Therefore, it's number one, that knowledge, not knowing what you're supposed to pay. Then secondly, in the system, that now that you know what you're supposed to pay, what is it that you're going to pay for this particular transaction? So it is you are drawing that distinction on what each person has to pay per particular transaction through explaining to people and establishing an efficient system, but also making people understand that in a situation where you are, let's say, for example, I go to my GM businessman that my brother was referring to, that you've established a small business in Chikubo, you're retailing goods. Now, you're supposed to pay, you're supposed to collect and pay VAT on those goods, right? Because the final consumer is supposed to pay, and you as a businessman, you collect on their behalf. Two, you're supposed to pay the income tax. As you as an individual, you're earning income from the business. You're employing people in the business, and those people may be within the threshold of tax, of being taxed. Also, you may be earning rent from that business. So the rent aspect comes in as well. In the same vein, we may find that this particular businessman is earning income within the threshold of business income. So that means that now you have all these several clusters of tax which you have to pay. And then that means that you need to know that if I'm operating this business, I should pay my individual income, a tax on that. I should be able to pay the business income for the business, the income that the business is earning that falls within the threshold. I should pay the individual income of the employees, that is the pay as you earn. I should also be able to collect the value added tax. So as much as you're saying I've been double taxed or I've been taxed extra, I'm not saying that it doesn't exist. Because there are several instances where courts have actually held that you are a double taxed an individual. But understanding what you're supposed to be taxed on and what amount you're supposed to pay is actually crucial to determining whether or not there is a double tax issue that's at play.
Okay, thank you so much. Coming to you as we go into the break, I want to look at the issue of tax collection and legalities that do come with it, and if you can pick it from the issue of double taxation that people think is happening. Usually the issue is the municipal council was here, they taxed me, or KCCA was here, they taxed me, and then I have to pay either another tax for URA, then another tax for something else. So to people it looks like you know, they are being drained in form of paying taxes, but also the process of, you know, collecting those taxes. It sometimes tends to be a little bit harsh on some people, and that brings about the issue of the moment you mention URA, it's a nightmare to some people. Yes, and find someone's shop has been closed for a week or so because they haven't paid, or KCC has closed their shop for a certain amount of time until when they've been able to clear. So talk about all that process and legally what protects, or actually not about protecting, what enables legally a person to be able to pay their tax peacefully without going through all that stress.
Yes, thank you very much, moderator. First, I need to stress this, that when it comes to taxation as a government policy is taken very, very seriously. In fact, if you care to read the President's State of the Nation address, he listed the government priorities. And I think number 7 of those priorities was actually increasing revenue. And also significant, if you read the minister's speeches, when we look at the appropriations of the budget, you'll see that they're expecting to raise about 37.2 trillion Uganda shillings. Now, that is important because I think this is the first time, remember we used to study about types of budgets in primary deficit surplus. I think this is the first time I'm actually seeing a budget being proposed. So that is that the amount of revenue we're expecting to collect domestically surpasses what we intend to actually spend.
And I think maybe it gets from the confidence of where we are, because at the moment, as we close this financial year, we're at 90% of the target. So maybe they have hopes that we can be able to make it much better in the next financial year.
Yes, I think they have been trying to close in with their targets. I think the projected overall domestic revenue mobilization for this financial year we are in, at the end of June, they expect to have 31.9 trillion shillings, falling short from the 32.2 or 3 that they actually set. So it's a very close margin. And among the strategies that they list in the domestic revenue mobilization strategy for this financial year is to close all the loopholes that are there and to enable them to actually collect enough tax. Now, that brings us to a very critical question of revenue collection and also addressing double taxation, as my brother actually put it forward. And I agree with him, especially to the extent that he identifies the critical aspects that affect the effective collection, or sometimes even leading into double taxation. The issue of taxpayer education is very important, and I think the ministry has, and you are all together, have tried to appropriate enough particular funds for it to be conducted. But it goes beyond that. You see, as I told you earlier, or as I highlighted, that the way taxes are being pursued and seen by the state is that it's a compulsory levy with no expectation of any quid pro quo treatment. But you see, we need to shift from that traditional stance and move towards what tax scholars refer to as fiscal welfare, in that provided you're collecting a particular amount of taxes, exorbitant taxes from the people, there should be a particular amount of give back that you give to them. And you need to be able to provide services, to begin with. You need to make people's lives comfortable, business environments comfortable, for them to generate more revenue and also to have more
to see value for their money.
Exactly. So that will lead to voluntary compliance when someone knows. You see, when you go to those OECD countries which have some of the best tax to GDP ratios, you'll see that actually people voluntarily comply. Oh, I forgot to pay my taxes. It's a system based on trust. Yeah, it's on trust, and I've had the benefit of witnessing or getting stories from some people who have been to those countries, and they will confirm this. So how to make it possible for the taxpayer is to simplify. Of course, it's a principle of tax that taxes should be simple, but really, they're very simple. Businessmen do not understand value-added tax. They need to be able to understand that this is actually not a tax on them, it's a tax on the final consumer.
What the issue is, definitely, you might say it's a tax on the final consumer, but that affects the price of the product that I'm selling. If my product is going to be expensive because of the percentage of the tax I'm adding, then that makes it difficult. That's why you see people, if I'm bringing, let's say, rice from Brazil, and rice from Tanzania is cheap, then people will try to bring in rice that is cheap. So there will be other options. But for me, the tax is really affecting me, and definitely that's a problem.
Yes, and that also partly stems from the non-compliance, so the loopholes that are existent in the tax system, because it means if I'm able to pay my value-added tax or to collect it and remit it to URA on your behalf, the taxpayer, since the system doesn't trust you enough to remit your taxes, and then my friend is evading. Actually, that would be that would be evading. Yeah. Then their products will be cheap and mine more expensive. Definitely. So when we need to have a wholesome enforcement of the tax laws by the taxman, so that if it's a particular commodity being taxed to a particular business, then all the business or sectoral players in that particular business actually get to actually pay the tax. That is also helpful for the government and the common citizen, but also it stabilizes the business environment. And that is not, of course, a green card for the government to just levy as much taxes and then try to enforce, since everyone will be able to pay. Because it may also stagnate business. If you recall that sit-down strike by the traders in Chikubu, where they were actually protesting against the electronic fiscal receipting and invoicing system, EFRIS. Yeah. In its way, it also led to increment in prices because it created a particular shortage in the supply. So there are so many things which can distort an economy, and there is need to pay particular attention. It's a very delicate landscape to play with. Yeah. So a taxpayer legally is expected to be able to file their tax returns. They have particular thresholds. I think for domestic, when we come to VAT, for domestic suppliers, you have 3 months. You have a month. You actually remit. You do returns on a monthly basis, depending on if you pass the particular thresholds after a quarter. And then we also, you may be interested to know that they're introducing a digital services tax for everyone who supplies a service and is not a resident in Uganda, to actually be able to pay 5% of that tax. It's in the amendments. So the interesting thing is that also the foreign person is expected to file returns. And probably they could also elect to have, I think the new amendment is bringing in an alternative to elect a tax agent here to be able to do it and all that. That means more business costs for the person who is best. So if you have a relative who has since left, or someone in the UK who supplies services in Uganda on a digital platform, they even define a digital market there. They're supposed to pay 5% tax and things like that. You need to make it easy. You need to simplify it even more. And the question of agents that my brother was addressing is also a delicate one, because under the income tax regime, for instance, you're not supposed to file, let's say, business income return which is below 90% accurate. You get a penal tax for being. So if you take it at 89% accurate, that means there is 11%. So government takes taxes seriously, and it's a whole process, but you just need to understand that I think it needs to do a lot of taxpayer education. I don't think it should start from the business angle that now let's go to traders and teach tax. It should start at a very basic level. URA is given enough money, it can do. It can organize events in schools through debates, through what, and educate these citizens.
And I think they're really trying so hard through different, like they're doing tax education in schools. You've seen one of the programs that URA is doing right now, Talk to the Commissioner, where the Commissioner is able to respond to different questions from the public, those that are really of concern. And I think URA is really so much committed in as far as creating this sensitization and awareness in terms of what they're doing and what the taxpayer needs to know. We talked about implementing the collection of taxes and the policies in unison, where the exemptions, let them be available to whoever qualifies to be able to get those exemptions. But most times is that you might be exempted for a given tax and you don't really know that you're exempted. For example, tax on agricultural machinery and very many other products. So if we can be able to help the public to get that information, to know where they have exemptions, then they can understand that actually everyone, if you fall into that category that is exempted, then you don't have to pay the tax, and that helps a lot. We're going for a short break. When we come back, we focus on revenue collection and widening the tax base, but also the revenues that we have as a nation, that's definitely from your taxes, how they can be able to help in developing our country, in us having our independence. If you're financing our budget 100%, I can tell you that's the first way as a country to be able to become independent. But if you find a big percentage of your budget, you know, being facilitated by someone else, what you eat in your home, what you drink, where you sleep, is being facilitated by another man, you are not actually secure. So certainly by paying the taxes, you're making sure that you're in charge of your home, you're in charge of your country, and definitely that helps us to grow as a nation. We'll be right back.
Colleagues, elections for special interest groups are calling. SITs, elections, youth, PWDs, elderly. It's time to vote for our leaders. June through August. From village to parish to district to nationals. Youth, PWD, it's time to vote your leaders. No! Elections are supposed to be peaceful. Easy vote, okay?
Youth, elderly, and persons with disabilities. It's time to choose our leaders. Let's show up and participate in the special interest group elections starting June through August this year. Your vote, your voice, my vote, my voice. This message is brought to you by the Uganda Electoral Commission.
Back, you're still watching the Checkpoint, where we speak about everything to do with the law and simplify it for you to be able to understand it in the most basic terms. We're discussing taxation and revenue collection and looking at the budget 2025-2026, what is in for you, but also encouraging you as a Ugandan that you need to be able to pay that tax, because that's what finances budget. Otherwise, we don't have anywhere else that money as a country other than us making sure that we're able to finance it through having to fulfill our obligation of paying taxes. We are streaming live on YouTube at U24 Television, and also on X at U24 Television UG. Get onto all those platforms and send in your comments and help your colleagues that are not able to watch live on air to be able to watch this show, and if you've just rewind and watch from the beginning such that you don't miss a thing. And as we went into a break, we're looking at how we can be able to actually widen the tax base and helping to make sure that every Ugandan can be able to pay their taxes in the most easy way. And if you can pick it right from there in a few and break down for us some of the tax amendments, should we be excited, or actually should we be worried about the tax amendments coming in this financial year?
I think both ways. We should be, I would say we should be very excited, but also very cautious because the amendments give a huge leeway, but with the huge benefit also comes a huge punishment if you default on the payment. So I think you have to be very excited. And the 2025 tax amendment is actually quite interesting because of the fact that it solves the problems we've been trying to talk about in tax collection, tax and revenue collection, and it sort of gives a Ugandan citizen the ability to pay their tax, makes it easier for them to pay their tax, creates exemptions, and also gives that incentive, that pinch if you do not pay. So I will begin with the income tax amendment. So specifically, there is now the exemption for Bujagali hydropower station has been extended up to 2030. And also then for agencies and bodies, and also for other international organizations that deal together with the UN as agencies. So they have that exemption. But for an average Ugandan, there is a 3-year tax exemption for anyone who who establishes a business starting 1st July 2025. The exemption is for 3 years, but there are 2 particular conditions that you must meet, which is that you must be able to file your returns within that period, and that your business must be duly established. Now that's important because together with that exemption, the tax amendment also provides that now your URSB business registration number and your national ID number, your NIN, are going to be used together with the TN. You pay tax. As long as you register with URSB and you have a registration number, you can pay tax on that. So it eases the friction between registering your business and paying the tax. So it sort of like bets you because you have that exemption, but also it makes it easy. So you don't have any way of saying, I've registered my business, but I don't know how to proceed and pay the tax. Then also, in addition to those 2 particular amendments, is the fact that there is now an exemption on if you create a business and you transfer income to that business, there is no tax on that. So there's an exemption for a transfer of money from an entity to a business, which means that you're not going to incur more. You're not going to incur more taxes because you want your business to earn the money that you should be earning. So that's essential. On the other hand, the Tax Procedure Code Act has been amended to create a double penalty for anyone who defaults on the electronic filing. So that means that on the one hand, the tax amendment is saying you have an exemption, right? If you establish a business with and you have those 3 years. However, if you do not file those returns, then it's going to be. And the other angle on the amendments, one of the important things is that, as Danton was talking about, if there is a transfer for digital services, if you have a digital service provider that is providing a service in Uganda through an associate, they'll be able to pay more. They should be able to pay more taxes because they derive a lot of revenue from Uganda. So that has been a question for a long time concerning the fact that we have very many international digital platforms and companies that are earning money and earning revenue from Uganda, and how we taxing them. So yeah, so now they're going to be taxed, and once there is an association that is established with a Ugandan entity, then the Ugandan entity will have to pay the usual 5%, but also an additional 15%.
Okay.
Another important tax amendment is that there is a 1% tax for an export transaction. So under the international transaction, if you decide to export goods out of Uganda and they're in raw form, if you've not added value to the goods, then you'll be taxed on that. So that's something that's essential to encourage Ugandans to add value domestically, and ensure that whatever they export out of Uganda, that you're not going to pick your coffee and take it to Brazil, or take it to the US, or take it to Italy. You're not going to pick your cotton and run it out of the country.
Good. Kindly, if you can.
So that's an essential way of telling people to add value.
Okay.
And another,
if you could just mention if there are more in interest of time.
Okay, there is now an addition concerning cigarettes. So people are going to pay more taxes. And I think that the other amendment, which is essential, is that when it comes to tax procedure, it's now easy for a citizen to determine what taxes they are going to pay through the IFRIS system.
Okay.
So your NIN and your URSB
can enable to do that. Thank you so much. Coming to you, we talk about the value for money, because what is going to interest me into paying the tax is because I know this tax I'm paying is for my own good. We talk about the issue, for example, you're a man and you keep giving a budget to your wife at home to do certain things, and where there are no priorities, and by the time you get to the priorities, the issue is friends, there is no money. On the issues that might not be priorities, money is there. Exactly. So when you want serious things to be done, the thing is money will come, money will come. So the question of debt, we've seen where we borrow money for certain projects and then money keeps on the accounts, and we don't utilize it, either because we didn't prepare well, or we are not ready to do the projects, or the bureaucracy is holding us back to be able to utilize that money. We start paying interest on that money before we even start using it. So the question of debt, you look at the budget and a very big percentage going into financing debt. On that issue for the people watching.
Thank you so much for that question. So first and foremost, we realize that our current budget is over 70 trillion. And the only projections we are supposed to have is about 30. 30 is above 30, slightly above 30. However, the problem you find that even in that money we have collected, some of it goes into service the debt. Now, the legal aspect, and if you are to look at it fundamentally from the start, we establish with the citizens, establish a social contract with our government, and we surrender certain rights. We allow them to collect our taxes and to do for certain things. Now, I think the biggest problem we have, yes, we give them those rights, but the biggest problem we have is that we have a mismatch of priorities. We invest a lot in certain aspects that do not bring back the revenue. So the idea that if at all our government was to handle our debt like a businessman, we would use our debt to invest and get more money, and that money pays for that debt. For example, if you're to look at the Entebbe Express Highway, it was financed through debt, and we are paying back. So if at all, let me say we are to establish all those expensive road projects, and we make it a fact that if at all we have built this road, every individual will pay toll fees, so that we pay for that debt. Now, clearing these debts does two things. If at all your debt to your debt reduces, even the international community can easily give you more money. However, when we have our debt and use it for things that do not easily generate money, we end up in problems. For example, we use debt to establish certain factories. I do not want to mention their particular names, but a factory takes like 10 years when they have not yet broken even. So economically, that does not make sense. So an individual paying tax will be like, even if I pay my tax, we shall put it in this entity that does not generate money. The other problem we have is that we get contractors that waste time. For example, if I told the contractor is given a job to build a hospital, they want to take 10 years to build that hospital. Yet if I told that hospital was built in like 5 years, we start paying the loan even before we have completed that project.
Yeah.
That does not make certain economic sense. So if that entity or if the business is built in record time, for example, actually Expressway is a good example. It was built in record time based on the fact that almost 50% of it is a bridge, but it was built in record time. If at all those projects like hospitals are built in record time, indeed they will generate revenue that will finance their own issues. Another issue I would like to quote Professor Ramadan Goli. He makes notice that we spend a lot of money on roads. We build a road in Gulu, we build a road everywhere. Not that roads are not important, however, the returns on those roads are not fast. We have to take a lot of time. We take 20 years to get back the money that we would have gotten. If at all we had invested that money in, let me say, an industry, we establish an industry, our products, we export them.
Yeah.
So I think
for the industry to run, it will need raw materials, raw
Yes.
materials that will be coming from Gulu.
Yes.
So still will need the infrastructure. Coming to you, if you can comment on the issue of tax collection, revenue collection, and how actually it helps us to finance the budget, and how we can encourage more Ugandans actually to get into the taxable base in order to increase on our revenue in about a minute.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I think the question of tax collection is quite pertinent, especially to some community. So it explains why it has been put to the fore. Yeah. But also, as I earlier mentioned, that without the servicing of debt, imagining we had zero debt, we would actually be able, with the projected revenue collection, would be able to actually push through and finance the particular activities of our country, because I saw only the payment of salaries takes around 18 trillion. So we could have a surplus if you are to use that. So revenue collection to that extent should be voluntary by the particular taxpayer, but that does not usually come that way because of the reasons we have already gone into in detail in this particular discussion. So from all those particular 8 departments, it should be, and as you highlighted, that URA is taking several steps to actually ensure that the taxpayer is educated. I think they should actually increase the particular volume of that teaching if it is ongoing, and if it is ongoing, of course, it is a very good initiative. So we need to understand the particular overview of the economy, to be able to appreciate the capability that it has, and to be able to actually derive the particular monies from their businesses, and also boost our revenue collection.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tim, for being a part of today's conversation. You've surely enabled us to allow the people that are watching us to understand this issue of taxation and revenue collection in the most basic terms, and I thank you so much. And our regards to the Guild at LDC. Thank you so much for being a part of this project of making sure that we help Ugandans to understand the law and actually be able to participate in as far as all concerns in this country. And I want to be able to appreciate the team online. That's on YouTube, on X. Thank you so much for your comments. Thank you for keeping it U24. Thank you for keeping it the checkpoint. And our regards to Choncho Agnes, who is watching, and she asks, why do we have an issue of supplementary budgets every year? Is it also planned on taxes, or is That's a question from Agnes. Ayaba Leviani says tax disputes that arise from tax decisions should be handled expeditiously. Alternative dispute resolution mechanisms should be encouraged more and taken away from URA, since it should not be a judge in a case where it is a party. ADR is key because litigation has its own demerits, including but not limited to backlog. That goes to our commissioner, URA. I hope he can be able to respond to you, Ayevale. Lloyd Tracy says this is a tax education. Raymond was talking about, and many more a part of this engagement tonight. And I want to call upon government, if there is a way that we can ease the way of doing business, but also the way we can be able to pay taxes. Certainly every Ugandan wants Uganda to become better, and we know that paying the taxes is one of the best way we can be able to support government to do for us great things. And the bureaucracy and the process of someone formalizing their business, just imagine starting from the registration at URSB, then you get your TIN, then you have to, if you're to get business from government, you have to register on e-government, then you have to do so I understand that they put one-stop centers where someone can come in and have all those services, and I think that's great that we can make the process a bit easier. So if we can find more ways on how we can help our business people to be able to understand, one, the taxes they have to pay, how they can be able to actually make those payments, it would ease all that and widen our tax base. I thank you so much. From my team, from production to the control room, we want to say a good night to you. My name is Ivan Tumukunde. Good night.
You got us on your wallet!